Welcome to the Australian Business Show, where we go behind the scenes with the entrepreneurs, executives and innovators shaping industries. Our guest today has taken a Melbourne-founded consultancy and grown it into a global technology powerhouse. Rick Campbell, the powerhouse himself, is the executive chairman and CEO of Act Group, a company delivering vendor-independent technology solutions across digital transformation, document lifecycle management and identity verification. Under Rick's leadership, Act Group has expanded into Sydney, Auckland, Chicago, New York and London. Rick, I've been really looking forward to this, mate. Welcome to the Australian Business Show, finally.
Thank you, mate. Good to be here. It's taken us a little bit of effort and time, but we finally made it happen.
Well, I remember the first time I asked you, you're like, I don't really do that kind of stuff. And I think I figured out what you were doing now in the background. It was like, hang on, it was the first time we'd spent any time together other than maybe at a track day or two. And you're like, who is this bloke? So it was almost like you were sort of going, hang on, I'll go away and just figure out, is this guy the real deal? Who is he? And then when we caught up again recently, you actually brought it up to me and said, hey, listen, I'd be happy to do it. So I appreciate that. But was that a bit of the plan?
I guess as we were alluding to earlier, Nick, there's not always a plan, mate.
So we were just talking off camera before we started this about, we had a question from somebody here, didn't we, about does imposter syndrome ever go away? And I don't know whether imposter syndrome is the right word or not, but what's your take on that? You've been very successful. We'll talk a bit about your businesses. You went through a big rebrand in 23, which was also
glad one of us remembered which date that was, Nick. Thank you very much.
And but my philosophy on that is that it never necessarily goes away. Call it what you like, whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's just a fear of failure, whatever the case may be. But that you've got to push through and do something anyway. But can you talk a little bit to your experience on that?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And I think like you, I see it more as a fear of failure, probably more aptly describes that mentality as I see it, as opposed to imposter syndrome. I think as you get older, and we're obviously just talking around Gen Z and Gen Y and all the different gens that you and I no longer find ourselves fitting into, I think as you become older and possibly more successful, and that's not only in terms of business and from a monetary perspective, but family life and the evolution and growth of your children and seeing them evolve into eventually become contributing members of society and good members of society, that recognition of what is termed success evolves. So it's not so much about failure. For me, it's just more about pushing through and continually testing yourself, because if you don't, then you're standing still. If you're standing still, life becomes pretty boring pretty quickly. So, there's so much to experience out there. We're all, by and large, living longer, particularly if you're fortunate enough to live in a country like this. So, for me, it's about experiencing as much as you can, and the only way to continue to experience and grow is to continue to push yourself. So, yeah, it's something that I think that all people, and I haven't met anyone who doesn't subscribe to this as yet, all people who continually see themselves as trying to achieve and evolve have to do that. And you have to continue to push yourself in different directions. Take yourself out of that comfort zone. Otherwise, it's just day in, day out, and that's a little bit boring.
Interesting. I think you mentioned even something about failure there. How do you view failure these days, whether it's personal or business failure? I'll leave it at that. How do you view failure?
I guess it's dependent on what metrics of success you set for yourself. And for me specifically, there hasn't necessarily been a defined or a definitive plan on what success looks like. Again, if we go back to what I was alluding to earlier, there's different levels of success. There's monetary, there's family, there's sporting, there's a multitude of different aspects as to what actually contributes to success. But for me, again, as part of that journey and being fortunate to travel extensively and deal with a lot of really interesting people, it's again about that evolution of, okay, if I throw this up against the wall and it sticks, that to me is a win. So it's not necessarily setting an expectation around having to achieve a certain level of remuneration from a particular engagement. It's just finding a niche opportunity, assessing, and I've become probably a little more circumspect in terms of assessing things before I dive in, but then just taking it as far as you can and realising at some point that, hey, I've made this work. I've taken something that was essentially nothing originally, whether that be an idea or a product, and taken it out there to market. And now I've achieved a modicum of success in terms of, again, placement within organisations from a commercial perspective, or eventually coming to a situation where you realise, wow, I've made it. And that isn't specific to any particular point in life, but as it relates to the different businesses that I've been fortunate enough to be engaged with, and then continuing to take it the next step, never resting on your laurels. So again, continuing to find opportunities to grow.
So do you?
That's a long-winded answer, isn't it, Nick?
Well, I think it does. It opens up all sorts of things. But so do you actively look to push yourself out of your
every day
zone? Yeah,
absolutely, and not to a ridiculous extent, but every day is about, again, and I guess it probably becomes subconscious at some point, where it's about just challenging yourself, coming to a crossroads, for want of a better term, and I believe we've all done this or come to this crossroads at certain points of our life. But do I take the easy route because it's easy, or do I take the harder route because it's going to test oneself? And there's no superhuman component to that, but continually testing yourself is just something I think that probably from both my parents was built into me, continually trying to be the best. If you're going to undertake anything, what's the use in doing it if you're not going to give it your best shot?
Give it everything. Yeah, and even in terms of bringing up kids, it's like whatever you're going to do is fine, but put 100% into it. If you're going to be a mechanic, or if you're going to be, it's not talking about mechanics, but be the best damn mechanic you can be.
100%.
Rather than just do it because it's a job.
Which I think, it's fair to say that a significant, I won't say the vast majority, but a significant component of society does find themselves in that situation where it is just a job, and they roll up, they do what they need to do, they get their 4 weeks holiday a year or whatever it is, and life's good. And that's fantastic if that's your chosen path. But for me, again, I guess we get one innings, unless there's something out there that somebody knows that I don't.
If you figure it out, let me know.
That's it. Yeah, you get one crack, as we say, so you may as well make it your best. And these days, and you're well travelled, I know that, there's just so much opportunity out there to experience. And again, you make the reference to family. Now I find myself in that situation where with my kids as young adults, now we're in a whole different stage of experience. So as opposed to, us going away on family holidays to Europe or the US or wherever, when they were in the younger years or teens, now doing that, which we still do as a family, as a cohesive family unit, that capacity to go to even a country, a geographical location that we've been to before, takes on a whole different semblance, because now they're older. Yep. And you've evolved as a person as well. I've actually just spent 4 weeks overseas on business in the UK and in the US with my oldest son.
I was going to say, I saw one of your sons were with you.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
It just put a completely different spin on what is a trip that I take probably 4 or 5 times a year. And spend extended periods in the UK and the US in particular. That's where most of our business emanates from. But to not only have a family member with me, that's taking nothing away from my exec team, who quite often will travel together, but to see him be able to experience what the old man does internationally. He's seen the business here. He's been involved in the business here. He's actually run one of our businesses for a number of years successfully. But to have now stepped into the main part of the business and actually see when we're sitting in meetings or engagements in the UK with some very well-credentialed and well-placed individuals, just to see his whole world open up. It's like, wow, okay, this is what it looks like, and these are the opportunities. So, yeah, it was fantastic. And again, that was a whole different instance and experience in a trip that I undertake regularly. So that was great.
Yeah, that's cool. Nepotism? How do you view and deal with that in your business these days? And I'm not saying that's. I don't even like the word.
Is there an inference there?
No. I just want to be very clear about that. All 3 of my boys work in my businesses.
Yeah, okay.
So,
well, there you go.
So,
and was that part of the plan for you, though?
No, it wasn't. No.
So I'm in the exact same boat.
Yeah. In fact, I think there was a time where I said, no, you need to go and work for somebody else for a little while. You can probably come back, but the world doesn't work where you just get given opportunities. And now my kids are blessed in that sense, where I guess they did, in a sense, but then the the opposite side to that coin is that you will be judged more harshly by your peers in that business because they had to apply for that job. You're the owner's son. It's like, so, how do you view all of that?
Well, I don't view it as nepotism for a couple of reasons, I guess. It's a really interesting point you make, and there's a couple of reasons behind that. Firstly and foremostly, I think like yourself, part of the wonderful opportunity when you build a successful business is that you can provide opportunities for others, both your kids and also those that have worked in the business for a long period of time, as an example. So for me, it was always about, when it came to my kids, a hand up, not a hand out. And to your point, not only from their peers within the organisation are they probably more under the magnifying glass and more in focus in terms of what they have to achieve to hold their own and justify their position, but from myself as well, and from themselves. All of my kids have been actively employed whilst they were in school. They all had jobs from the age of 14. Whether it be washing dishes at the local cafe, packing apples in a cold room. One of my sons constantly reminds me of that. But all of these jobs that made them appreciate the value of a dollar. They're all very cognizant that they've had a very, I guess, in terms of their growth and in terms of their childhood. I won't use the term privileged, but they have. They've had a great upbringing in terms of the schools they went to, but always very cognizant of the fact and always impressed by their mother and myself that, hey, this is all great, but if you want it for yourself, you're going to have to work for it. So to see them now have the work ethic that they do is very emboldening for me and for my wife. But also in terms of coming back to your initial question around nepotism, I never actually had a plan for any of the kids to work in the business, and now they all do, which has become a bit of an oh wow moment in terms of when I get asked that question. Was that always, I guess, the plan? Absolutely not, because it comes back to that initial premise. There hasn't really been a plan. It's always been about, it's a bit of build the plane as you go, as we were saying earlier, which is fantastic. I love it. As you take on more responsibility in terms of team members, yes, and clients and whatnot, there does have to be a plan. But in terms of the kids being in the business, no, absolutely not. In fact, when I think of my eldest, excuse me, just prior to COVID, I was importing a very high quality ketogenic meal replacement out of the US, and I just out of the blue got a call from this very world-renowned metabolic scientist who was the founder of this particular business. 5 brothers are involved. And got a call and an introduction to one of them. They were sort of wondering who's this crazy Australian that's importing this significantly expensive product, and particularly once you throw on duties and taxes and everything else into Australia. Anyway, by the end of this phone call, I negotiated.
Nothing like what they are now, mate.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, very, very good point you make. But by the end of that phone call, we'd negotiated that we would be the distributor for that product in Australia, which was not part of the conversation at all, but that's just how things tend to evolve. So I actually called my oldest son at that stage, who I think was probably 19, into the office. He was studying business at university, very much into his fitness. And again, I think that's as a result of his parents being very active. And I said to him, here's an opportunity. I said to import this. I said, you're studying business, you're into your health, you follow the ketogenic lifestyle yourself. If you want to run the business, I'll bankroll it for 2 years, but after that, it's got to stand on its own 2 feet. That in and of itself, that conversation was a test. I was hoping that he'd grab it by the throat and say, yeah, absolutely, Dad, which he did, which was great, but he could have, also turned around and said, no, not interested, which would have been interesting given that I just negotiated this deal. Anyway, he took it and he ran with it. COVID started 2 weeks later, and all the associated challenges. We went through a plethora of issues, and I won't get into the detail, the learnings of the Australian quarantine and customs system and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, he made it work, built it into a business where initially we just had the rights for Australia, did such a great job that they then offered him New Zealand and then the UK and then Europe. So here's this 19-year-old kid who, by virtue of what his father had put in front of him, had an opportunity. But again, it was a hand up, not a handout. He had to go and make it work. And now that's a flourishing business that does exceptionally well for us. And to see his journey and what he learnt, and I actually said to him at the start, win, lose or draw, It's not only about the monetary recompense that you may achieve through this, it's about the lessons you're going to learn in business. And then he approached me, I think probably 6 months ago, and this is the one that's just been overseas with me, to say, hey, Dad, I'd love to step across into the main business now and have a crack at that. His younger brother's been in the business, I think, for probably 3 years now, and he'd worked externally in different industries as well. So to see them both involved is fantastic. It's given me, I won't say a new lease on life, but it's certainly given me a new level of interest with the younger generation. But from the perspective of nepotism, no. I've got an amazing executive level team who I'm incredibly loyal to and who are incredibly loyal to me. They've earned their stripes in terms of where they are. If one of the kids was to end up in a senior level position, fantastic, but they'll have to earn it. And conversely, we recently, probably 12 months ago now, or coming up to 12 months, took on 2 young guys, same age as my eldest, 24, in the US. And I was a little bit hesitant. We're talking about, your Gen Zs and your Gen Ys, and I was a little bit hesitant because I was cognizant of the fact that my experience outside of my own children with some of the younger generation was very much a mentality of expectation. I was fortunate enough to work with these 2 young guys in another business I was involved in and was introduced to them, totally impressed with them. So when they approached me in New York sort of 14 months ago to say, hey, we'd love to come on board with the main business, I was fortunate that I'd had a try before you buy. I'd experienced their work ethic in an investment business, and they have been phenomenal. So it's really enthused me to want to work with the younger generation because they bring a whole different level of interest, enthusiasm, and that's, again, taking nothing away from the team. They're all super enthusiastic, but these guys just bring a new energy and a new approach, which, again, comes back to that continually evolving and growing. So, the opportunities in front of all of the younger team members, my kids include, but they've still got to earn it every single day.
As a leader, so you're executive chairman and CEO. It's kind of 2 hats there. There's a bit of governance, a bit of operations, sort of cuts across those 2, at least in terms of a definition of those roles. But do you set the tone of the energy, do you find, or have you been able to build that executive team now where they've still got to feed off you as the business owner and the business leader, right? That energy comes from somewhere. If you're lethargic,
that ain't going to work.
Moping around, it's never going to work, is it?
It's not going to work, no.
Yeah. Because how many businesses do you have now?
I'm a director, and which means I'm actively engaged in 23 businesses globally at the moment. Now, having said that, they're not individual businesses. So if I look at the AT Group,
sure.
Each division under the AT Group is its own registered business. Yep. And then if you replicate that internationally, and particularly since Brexit, where you now have to be established in Germany, in Poland, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those come under the same business umbrella, but I'm actively involved in a ridiculous amount of businesses and industries. Now you're making me think about it. Back to your question, absolutely. Look, for me, leadership is always about leading from the front, and that comes back to time in the military and beyond. I've always set the premise of trying to lead by example. I'm far from perfect, but having said that, when it comes to energy and giving it your all, and as we were saying earlier, if you're going to do something, do it right. How can I expect somebody to have a energetic approach to business if they're not seeing that from the leadership? And that's not just me, that's my executive team. And my executive team, again, from a energy perspective, are amazing. But they love it, they thrive on it. We all know that if we stopped or tried to do at this stage a lesser role that required less enthusiasm, less momentum, less energy, we'd be bored.
So how do you find those people? You and I have spoken a little bit about this too in the past, and about finding good people. Now, I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but as you've built a big successful business now, that it's a little bit easier that people, success attracts success, and people go, okay, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of where they're going. But if we go back to when you started, I think 2015, if I did a bit of reading, but 2015, was it different? Was it harder then?
Interestingly enough, no. Initially, it was actually a number of people that are still, and two members in particular, my longest serving team member and my chief sales officer, were probably two of the reasons that I did step out on my own, because they were actually saying, look, we can, if you want to go and do this yourself, we're going to follow you. And I was already given consideration to stepping out on my own, so it wasn't so much me taking them, it was more them pushing me. And it wasn't that, there was any lethargy in terms of my want to go out and work for myself. It was, again, just identifying an opportunity. In terms of finding good people, so I've always been very fortunate to have good people around me. Sometimes, Nick, some of the good people that you engage, people change over time. Their circumstances change over time. So sometimes you identify people to bring on and you hold high aspirations for them, and it doesn't work out for whatever reason. They're not quite the people you thought they were. They're not the risk takers. They're not loyal. Their circumstances change. So that's an interesting part of the journey as well. But I've been fortunate in that, again, those senior level members of my team have been with me for a long, long time now. And I think because we continue to evolve and because we're a tech-based business, and we don't try and be all things to all men, we try and identify cutting-edge technologies that aren't in beta phase, so they have been tried and tested and kicked down the road, as it were, but they haven't quite tipped over to mass global domination. It keeps it really, really interesting. And that, I think, keeps them enthused as well, because these guys are superstars. The guys in my team are absolute superstars. They are that 1%, and they could go and apply that enthusiasm, that IP, that IQ, EQ, AQ in terms of adaptability to any position and be successful. So I'm fortunate, not lucky, but I'm very fortunate to have people like that working with me, not for me, working with me. It makes me a better leader, makes me a better person, and keeps it fun.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And fun's really important. Enjoying it is really important.
It is important because most days are filled with challenges in business.
Yeah, but I like that. That's what keeps it interesting. If it was easy, if there was no challenges, if there was no bump and grind, then you'd be rolling up to the office and it'd just be, Groundhog Day, wouldn't it?
This is the issue that sometimes I get, some people go, this problem with this customer and that problem with that customer. I said, that's why we're in business.
No problems, mate, just solutions.
Just solutions, just opportunity.
That's it, absolutely. But that in and of itself has a mindset in terms of how you view things. And I had this conversation actually with my middle son. And again, it was militarily, it was a lesson that was taught to me years ago on a leadership course. And I'd walked into his office and I could see he was dealing with a bit, you could just sort of read the body language. Not to mention the fact that he had his headphones on, so he didn't know I was behind him, so he let roll with a fairly significant expletive. So I could tell he was under the pump, as it were. Anyway, I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, son, what is it? And he said, dealing with X, Y, Z. And it was probably 6 or 7 things. And I said, okay, so let's just break those down. I said, take your headphones off. Let's just break those down. So rather than looking at them cumulatively, let's just break them down to individual components, right? And once we've done that, write them down. And he did that. And I said, okay, now put a grade next to them in terms of what's the most important thing you need to deal with. And it went from 1 to 7 or 1 to 8. I said, right, now look at them individually and deal with them individually in terms of what's the most important to least important. I said, now all of a sudden it's not one big problem. I said, it's just 7 individual challenges that you have to work through. I said, by the time you get through the first 2, the rest will just fall into place. So it's a matter of being able to look at the same situation. You and I might look at the same situation, but have a very different approach in terms of how we are going to facilitate an outcome. Yeah. And again, I look at every one of these things as challenges and I get frustrated but it's how you deal with it and get on with it and just make it happen. I spend 5% of my time worrying about what happened yesterday, probably 15% of my time with what I'm dealing with today, and the other 80% about what's happening tomorrow, what's the future. Yeah. I just refuse to get bogged down in what has transpired or reflect too deeply on issues from yesterday. Just move forward, get on with it.
And what do you do with those team members that aren't able to move with you now? I mean, employment law in Australia is really difficult, right? Like I find that in our business. Every now and again we have someone, and it might not be that they were always that way. Sometimes the business has evolved. You said it before, people change, the business has evolved. And they haven't been able to evolve with it. They go, no, now that's beyond my comfort zone for whatever reason. What do you do with those people? How do you handle that?
It's a great question. It's only happened to me on a couple of occasions, fortuitously enough, and they've kind of dealt with themselves.
Yep.
And by that I mean, because of the momentum that the business has, and you alluded to it earlier, and apologies if I'm going to jump in and steal your thunder in terms of the evolution of the main business, the name change, etc. But because of the momentum of the business, the continual evolution of it, and everyone is just on board where it's go, 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 very manageable, but just, super exciting. What's going to come up today? What's going to happen today? If you are not part of that ethos, if you don't share that mentality, you just know you're not going to fit in anymore. Fortunately, on the few occasions that people have found themselves in that situation, they've moved on of their own volition, which is great.
Absolutely.
Then I don't have to manage it. But it's also the way that we are set up in terms of remuneration, in terms of growth within the business. If you're not, again, a self-starter, if you're not someone that's going to be part of the team, and I've always, I guess the construct of my businesses have always been around how we used to run our patrols in the military, which was we were all able to operate in small teams to a very high level of individuals, and then pull together as a team as and when required, and then break off and do our own thing. That's worked really, really well for me. So if you are part of that mentality for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden your situation changes and you don't fit in, you're going to know that pretty quickly. And even for those people that have moved on, they've realised, I think, that okay, this just isn't for me anymore for whatever reason. So again, it hasn't really been a situation I've had to deal with because they've dealt with it themselves.
Yeah, yep. So we'll go back then to was it 2015 CPC that you started? I think Campbell Partners Consulting, is that right?
Yeah.
So and then 2023 you've rebranded to Act Group. What was the litmus?
What instigated that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I first started CPC, and it was actually a very good friend who's been a long-term client across multiple professional services firms, he sort of tapped me on the shoulder a number of times and said, look, in this specific category, when we think about our requirements, we don't think about an OEM, equipment manufacturer. We think about Rick Campbell. And that was predicated on the level of service, white glove service, as one of my Chicago team members terms it. And that was a bit of a salient moment for me. It was like, well, if they're thinking about me for this specific category, that's what I'll call the business. I'll attach my name to it, which was kind of a weird experience as well. And hence Campbell, the evolution of Campbell and Partners. I think, it came to a point, and it was just before COVID. And coming back to your query earlier, I was having more and more people approach me. And I've never approached anyone to join the business. It's always been, for me, part of the journey has to be they have to approach me. And that's not an egotistical thing. That's them demonstrating to me and showing to me that they're keen to come on board. I've been very fortunate in that the people that have come on board have worked for me as account managers from our suppliers. So it's kind of a try before you buy scenario where it's not a matter of sitting in 3 interviews and then putting the best representation of themselves forward in 3 1-hour interviews. As these guys have actually serviced me as a client for 2-3 years' time. It's the best try before you buy. It's the best job interview ever because I get to identify how they approach me as a client and hence how they would approach our clients if they came on board. So in terms of the growth of the business we had probably 5 people, 7 people under Campbell and Partners, but our clients were continually coming back to us saying, hey, that approach you take of vendor independence, not representing a brand per se, just sitting on the side of the fence for the client to facilitate the best outcome for them from the available providers. Could you take that and apply it to different modalities? So whether it be in cyber defence or whether it be in terms of building software, bespoke software solutions. So we started taking on all of these additional components to the business, and all of a sudden Campbell and Partners just didn't fit because that was very much associated with document management, facilitating global print solutions for organisations, and now it was well and truly outside of that realm. We were providing cyber solutions for organisations. We're really getting into software. So it was, one of my more significant business advisors that said, I think we need to do a regroup. We sat down, and the at symbol is obviously very much aligned with technology. So at group became the parent entity. And then under that, we have 3 divisions, which is at docs, at ID, and at soft, which is essentially our document management division in at docs, go figure. At ID being our cyber resilience, and at soft being our bespoke software development. So it just made sense. And it also made sense as we grew globally to remove my name from it. I stepped back at one point to just being chairman, but then as the business continued to evolve and grow, wasn't so much, Nick, that I was sitting there as a passive observer. And it's a fine line between trying to develop your team to be the best that they can, which sometimes involves you stepping back. I wasn't very good at the step back bit, so hence why.
It's not your style, mate.
No, it's not at all. And as my wife continually says, every time I find 5 minutes, I fill it with 10. And truer word was never said. But I like to keep busy. I like the opportunity, and we found a really good balance of self-development on my team, and they make me so proud. And you have moments where you sort of sit there and think, again, how did this all happen? And then you snap out of it and get on with it, and just try and keep it growing.
Yeah. Do you have and I'm not asking you what it is, but do you have an exit strategy? A lot of people say to me, when you come into a business, you've got to start with the end in mind. What's your exit strategy?
Yeah, we're somewhat the antithesis of a lot of business models, and I'm fortunate, again, when I think of being flown to Japan to sit down and share time with the global chairman of organisations like Canon Inc., to have those opportunities, and then to have individuals like that turn around and say your business model, whilst he could never do it because they're beholden to shareholders, et cetera, they just think that we've got the best business model in the world because of the way we operate and our independence. That in and of itself is what continues to drive our quest to continue to evolve and provide and facilitate outcomes for our clients. Yeah, to make us stickier, not because we're trying to achieve a specific exit strategy. Yeah, there'll be one at some point in time. I've been tapped on the shoulder a number of times in terms of acquisition or investment, et cetera. Like to run my own ship, and it's not about being a control freak, although some people may feel that I am. The fact that I'm right 99% of the time has nothing to do with it.
That's right. That's just a blessing.
I say that. Yeah, I say that with a huge degree of humility. That's a joke, absolutely. But having said that, I've just always been a believer that I would rather take the kick in the arse if I'm wrong, and share the pat in the back if we're right. Because man's not an island. You need that team to be successful. But success wears many hats. There'll be an exit strategy. The last time I was approached, I'd said no to this organisation, but we ended up taking on one of their software products, and it's been a huge success for us. I'm having too much fun, mate. And if someone taps me on the shoulder again with a big number, which again has happened, and I said no, because for me, fortunately, I was in a situation a number of years ago where it wasn't about the money. And I don't say that lightly, because anyone that knows me will know that, I do appreciate a good life, and you can't have that without generating wealth. When I say it's not about the money, I'm comfortable that, I'm never going to have any challenges financially moving forward. So now it's just, again, about how far can I take this business? From what started in Melbourne, and I still remember having the conversation with my wife when I did step out on my own, and she's awesome. She's always been incredibly encouraging. And I said, babe, well, Melbourne-based business, maybe a little bit of interstate travel, we'll see how that goes. And I think within 4 months we had offices in Chicago, New York, London, and off it went. And that was at the invitation of our clients to say, you're doing this for us here. We're part of an international organisation. Can you replicate this?
Yeah, it's incredible.
And it never occurred to me to say no. I remember, and I've told this story a million times because it's a great representation of my approach to business and that of my team. But one of our longest term clients, top 10 global law firm, fantastic firm. The local entity was acquired by this global firm. And I've actually just caught up with this individual in Washington, D.C. Fantastic guy. He came out as the Global Chief Information Officer. His local contact or his local representative, who again is a good friend and long-term client, introduced me to him. So this poor guy got off a flight after flying in from the east coast of the US, and the first thing he gets presented with is me. And all of my enthusiasm. I felt somewhat sorry for him, but he did say to me, he said, look, we'll be back in touch. Love what you've got to say. I'll follow up and we'll have a call. Anyway, I think I contacted him 3 times and I didn't get anything back. I thought, okay, I'll give him one more try, follow-up email, and see if I get a response. Anyway, I didn't have to. He did respond to me. He said, look, all good. I've now got complete control of this particular category. What's next? When can we meet up? And I think it was a Tuesday. Anyway, I flew to the US. I was in Pittsburgh in 2.5 days. It was for a 45-minute meeting. That was it, in and out.
We've had this conversation.
Pittsburgh, yeah. I think it was 33 hours, door to door.
Yep.
Point was I got the gig.
Yeah, because you showed up. You went to the trouble and you showed up.
That's right. And people acknowledge that. You don't have to walk in with a sign saying, hey, I've just travelled all the way from Australia door to door just to be here. The accent tends to give it away a little bit anyway. But the premise of the conversation...
And the bags under the eyes from the 33
it was a bit
hours
of that.
travel.
And actually, mate, truth be told, too, I'd picked up a loogie on the flight, so I was sick as a dog. But it was more about what wasn't said, to your point, in I showed up.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's that sort of unwritten rule that, well, if this guy's going to do this just to have a crack at getting the gig, what does that suggest that he's going to do? And the fact that organisation is still a client, that multiple representatives from that organisation have now gone on to other very significant professional services firms and taken us. We're one of the first phone calls as an organisation that they place because they know they can depend on us. They know we're going to say what we're going to do and then we're going to do it.
Yep.
And if there's any issues, which there always are in business life, it's about the communication, it's about the open dialogue. And we're going to work our proverbial off for them. So, these clients we've had for a long, long time, and it's all predicated on that network, doing the right thing by people. People remember that. So it's been a good basis from which to build all of the businesses in which I'm involved.
Yeah.
And when I look at that, and you and I, met at a track day, and if I think of the evolution into cars, everyone just assumes that I must have been a mad car guy as a teenager. Absolutely not. I never had the picture of the Lamborghini on the wall or any
Countach.
of that. Wasn't my thing at all.
Yeah.
That was just, again, I can thank my wife for that, she bought me an AMG drive day down at Phillip Island one day. That was it.
You were sucked into the vortex.
Massively, but so cool. I mean, I used to own and be heavily involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so that was my out.
Yep.
In terms of being able to switch off. That's not my strong point. But then after spinal surgery and a few other things, I had to get into something else. So anyway, I found myself involved in car racing. So, this most recent trip, and I sort of found myself out at Dunsfold at the Top Gear test track with the Stig, doing laps in a new hypercar by Praga. It's, when I sit back and see these little moments and think through it, how the hell did I end up here? That's the really cool thing about business and extending yourself.
Now, your son was on this trip with you.
He was, yes.
Did he get to drive it?
No. So that's a really good question you asked. So he did. We went to Goodwood Festival of Speed, which I've been to a number of times, and again, very fortunate through relationships with the likes of Praga and Singapore to be invited to opportunities and attend opportunities like that, which is fantastic. So we went to, after Goodwood, they held Singer held a drive day there, so he got to go and have a ball with that. Marino Franchetti, who's just an amazing guy, he's a development driver for Singer, and just one of life's absolute gentlemen, and if you have a look at him and his relationships, etc., he's got quite a background, and his brother Dario as well. For my son to be able to be involved in something like that was very, very cool. He didn't get to come to Dunsfold with us because he picked up the flu, so he missed out on the ride in the Praga. His old man sort of taking him around, which that test track, by the way, for Top Gear, it's horrible.
Yeah, well, but it even looks it.
It's horrid. Yeah. It's not a test track. It's 2 runways with a couple of bridges in between and a few witches' hats here and there. Yeah. There are literally aircraft. You can actually see in the photo there's a 747 parked in the background. And unbeknownst to me, it's actually still a live runway.
Oh, is that right?
And the only way you apparently find out on it when you're out there spinning around and trying to concentrate on not putting this, 1.8 million euro car into a wall is that the lights start flashing on the runway and then the aircraft come in. Didn't happen whilst I was out there, fortuitously enough. But yeah,
That would never happen in Australia.
No, absolutely no. There wasn't a lot of OH&S happening there. And it wasn't too restrictive. But again, finding myself in those situations and just some of the amazing people you get to meet. I met some phenomenal people from Florida whilst I was there. That's probably the juice. And it's only actually, as I sit here and I think about it, that's probably the juice of what I love about business is if you approach it in a way that it's just a big adventure, you don't know what's going to come next. Yeah. You don't know what tomorrow looks like. You don't know who you're going, sitting in a podcast with a guy I met at a track day.
Yeah. But you're an incredible leader, and I don't say that just to blow smoke. I mean, I've seen a specific example of this, and it's one of the track days that we were at. You had two of your cars
there. Okay.
You had one of your employees there. Now, I don't know if it was your CEO or somebody else, but you brought them along with one of your cars to a track day.
Oh, man. And you do have a good memory.
And I'm like,
a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. It was a long time ago now. And I thought, who does that? People don't generally do that. But that's why I always wanted to sort of, I guess, meet you that day. And I was like, what do you do? What are you into? Obviously, I love business. But more importantly, I love people that are actually making an impact on the world. And I think your leadership style is clear to me one of the ingredients in your success is because it's about people, and it's about giving back. And those experiences that you have, you take people on that journey. It's not lost on you, the privilege of those experiences. Not that you haven't earned them. I'm not taking anything away from that. But that you take people on that journey with you, I think is really cool, and that's a good lesson for a lot of people to learn.
Thank you for that. Yeah, when I sit here, and again, I'm not a particularly reflective person. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it comes back to, as I said, I don't think about what happened yesterday a lot, so I don't reflect unless something's gone wrong.
Yeah,
and then I will reflect. How did that happen? How much of that responsibility sat with me, my team, the client, the supplier, whatever? Okay, now I've identified that. I can foresee why it happened, and it's not going to happen again. Everyone makes mistakes. If you make the same mistake again, tends to not work out too well in business. Coming back to your question, I guess, and I know the exact track day that you're talking about, and I was actually just in a meeting with that particular individual now who's the CEO of my cyber resilience business. Fantastic guy. So I was at Phillip Island, and I had him in my 488 Spider. Now, firstly and foremostly, in his defence, I know he can drive, so I wasn't just putting a plotter in a pretty significant car. I know he can drive, but to me, it's giving people that opportunity. Apart from the fact that I'm fortunate that pretty much all the team that I work with are friends, and I don't say that lightly. We've met through business. Part of the reason they are friends is because we've been in the trenches together. They've worked their asses off for our mutual success. So they've done the hard yards. So I'm respectful of them, they're respectful of me, and we've become friends. So firstly and foremost, I want to enjoy those experiences with friends. And essentially I have a handful of friends outside of business who and I'm fortunate to have 5 close friends. But I get to enjoy a lot of experiences with my team members. So it's funny you mentioned that particular one. I've been on, I did a high country Porsche Targa race with one of my other CEOs, the South African. So cars is... And again, just giving this some thought tends to be a bit of the stickiness with a number of the team members and something that we enjoy. But to me, Nick, it's about if I avail someone of that opportunity and they're the type of person that I think they are, they're hopefully going to sit in that car and think, I want one of these.
Yeah.
And this may sound self-serving, but it's not. Self-serving in so, okay, that means I can get more out of them in terms of output and achievement. Yeah, absolutely, but it's actually going to help them evolve and be all they want to be. And that's, whether it's your kids or the people that work for you, I don't think that there can be anything else from which I derive more pleasure than seeing people succeed. I want to succeed, absolutely, but I can't do it by myself. So to see and embolden my team and provide them the opportunity to end up, which they do, driving cars like that now, that's incredibly satisfying, because if that's what they set as an achievement for themselves, if I can in some way, shape or form assist them to get there, brilliant. It's the same as, when we travel overseas, the kids would fly at the pointy end of the plane with us. And it's funny because you'd watch people get on and walk past them, and particularly in Australia with that tall poppy mentality, so, what are these kids doing up here? Exactly. Yep. But for me, it came back to that basic premise of kids, if this is what you want when you get older, you're going to have to work hard for it. So to give them that experience can be viewed in two ways: spoiled, or, wow, I've tried this, I like this, I'm going to work towards achieving this for myself. And that's how I've always viewed it. If you give somebody that lived experience of something that they'd like to achieve and have as a normal part of their life, if they've actually had a taste of it, then they're going to work that much harder to achieve it. And it's worked out well for me. It's worked out well for the team as well.
It's funny you talk about flights, because once you've flown business or first class,
there's no going back, mate.
It's horrendous. and I'm not again trying to. Some people can't afford it. That's okay. I get it. But a couple of years ago, I had to go to the States, and it was fairly last minute. I thought, I'll just grab a ticket economy. Worst mistake of my life. It was horrendous.
It's not good. No. It's interesting. My first experience was actually at Sydney, and I was coming back. So domestic business is nice, but it's first on, first off. But I remember when I came off that flight, and I thought to myself, and this would be going back to the early 2000s, but I remember thinking to myself, I stood up to get off the flight. I was in one, and I stood up and I looked back, and it was a chockers flight. Full, every seat full. And I just remember thinking to myself, not with a mentality of superiority, but I just thought, I'm not going back there again. So I'll do what I need to do.
It's the driver.
To work, and there's multiple drivers, whether it be financial, security, whatever, sending your kids to a good school, whatever it is, whatever your motivation is. For me, it was legroom. I'm 6'3", and I didn't want to be stuck back in the sardine tin. But it was a motivator. But conversely, I used to give, and I think I may have mentioned this to you, but I used to be asked down to my kids' school to give a career talk. And it was fairly consistent in that it was they'd have an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, and me. So I think I was the entrepreneur. Yeah. And I'd sort of come in at the end after these very well-educated gentlemen had or ladies had made the statement about the importance of tertiary education, et cetera, and I'd sort of come in at the other end and say, well, I went to university in my mid-20s, and it was probably the greatest waste of time in terms of what's contributed to my perceived success. And I'd relate to them a story I had where I'd go down to Phillip Island for these drive days. And I remember when, my wife purchased me this AMG driveway, I thought, right, want an AMG, work towards getting that, a Mercedes supercar. So I'd go to those drive days, and you'd go up to lunch, and there's like 100 people in the lunchroom. You'd look around, and they're all senior management, and you'd be talking to people, et cetera. And then as I became more successful, you'd be going to McLaren and Ferrari and Aston Martin drive days. And the groups got a lot smaller. So instead of 100 people in the lunchroom, there was 20, 15. What really struck me from the first one of those lunches or drive days I went to was that 90% of those individuals were self-made. Yeah. They weren't employees, as it were. These were guys that had sort of gone above and beyond, backed themselves, and that always stuck with me. So I'd go to the school and say, education's important, but it's not everything. Your education actually starts when you leave school in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I was lucky. I developed a friendship with Jack Cohen, and Jack Cohen, I'm sure you know who he is, but he's worth a lot of money, multi-billionaire, and
Reebok.
And so he's Hungry Jack's, KFC,
okay, sorry,
and Domino's
in Australia,
and so I had lunch with him just last Friday, I think it was. But it wasn't his story, and I must say, but he did say that I can't remember who it was now. Super successful person. They said, I left school early, and it was a mistake. Like, oh, really was that? He said, yeah, I left at 16. I should have left at 12.
12, yeah. Oh, look, that...
and I've probably done a total injustice of that story on behalf of Jack, just by the way, Jack. So, but,
shout out to Jack.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting point you make. I mean, I was fortunate enough. My father left school at 12. He was a professional everything. He was a professional rugby league player. He was a professional golfer. He was a phenomenal sports person. Left school at 12, probably made his first... Not that this is necessarily... suggestive of what success constitutes, but, probably made his first million in his mid-20s, just through brutal hard work, but left school when he was 12. And that was always a lesson that sat in my mind because he worked his proverbial off to be able to send myself and my brothers to one of Victoria's top private schools. And I was literally a square peg in a round hole. They knew I was intelligent to a point, but, and I still suffer from this to a degree today. I have the concentration span of a goldfish. If what you're saying to me doesn't interest me, I can hide it better these days and make it look like I'm listening to you, but there's a million things going on in here. So I was cordially advised at the end of year 11 that I was not necessarily representative of the type of person they wanted in this school. But this was mid-80s. That was sort of banker, doctor, lawyer, none of which I was going to be. And that was fine. But I remember leaving there at the time and I felt like a failure. Both my brothers had gone through and done well. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? It was that square peg in a round hole. And it was, when I eventually very quickly found something that I was good at when I got outside of school is when, again, I learned that, life really starts when you leave school. Before then, you're sort of wrapped up in this cotton wool and this cocoon, and particularly at a private school where there's that degree of elitism, which is fine. But I left there. I went into the regular army, so I went from dealing with people that were from a very privileged background to not, and that was the best lesson I ever learned.
Yeah, I'll bet. So when I started this, I wanted to really speak to other people like me, like you, that had really not come from anything, that have wanted to start and create something of their life. So for the entrepreneur that's listening right now, who's maybe built a solid local business, wants to go global, wants to expand, what's the one piece of advice that you wish you had earlier?
Well, first thing I'd say, if you want to go global, is be careful what you wish for. The fantastic thing about Australia is that tyranny of distance, but ultimately as we sit here today, we're 9 hours behind the UK and we're 14 hours behind the west coast of the US, so be prepared for early mornings and late nights. But that's like flying to Pittsburgh for a 45-minute meeting. That's just what you have to do. So in answer to your question, outwork every other individual. You've got to back yourself. The one thing I would say in terms of expansion internationally, and this is where I've seen a number of businesses come undone, is that you see the markets in the US, 350 million people, give or take, 70 million or thereabouts in the UK. Very attractive markets when you look at our 27 million, and I get that. And then conversely, you've also got the advantages of GBP, Euro and USD converting back to Australian dollar is a great thing. What they don't seem to realise or plan for is that when you're setting up a business internationally, if you're funding that out of Australia, your $1 Australian is buying 50 pence. So very quickly I've seen businesses come undone because from a cash flow perspective, they've stepped in, undertaken all of the setup costs, bringing on staff, et cetera, et cetera. The one lesson I would say that I learnt or that I planned for and served me incredibly well was before I established my businesses internationally, I had clients ready to go, revenue generating from day one. So I never had to tip in any currency from Australia to establish my businesses over there, or not anything significant, other than, setting up an LLC in the US or a limited company out of the UK. So just from a cash flow perspective, very much appreciate that the AUD from an FX perspective is not strong, and that can bring you undone. The sooner you can start generating revenue locally, profit, don't care about the top line, Nick, I'm all about bottom line and profitability, then it makes that journey that much easier.
Yeah, nice. Good one. Mate, thank you. You're an absolute inspiration to me,
Thank
and
you,
actively,
very generous of you.
Unashamedly, sort out to sort of build a relationship and rapport with you.
You've been great, and I've loved and really enjoyed watching your success and evolution, whether it be with the podcast or generally. I very much enjoy our chats and our catch-ups. So thank you.
Yeah, well, long may they continue, mate.
Indeed.
And I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate.
If you like the content, you like what we speak about, share it around. There's a lesson in this for everybody. Comment below and make sure you follow us on all of the different podcast streaming services. See you next time on the Australian Business Show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Share it with others who are passionate about healthcare and business. Stay tuned for more incredible stories and insights in our next episode. Until then, keep pushing boundaries.
Thanks for tuning in to the Australian Business Show. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to rate and review us on your favourite podcast platform. Hit that subscribe button and stay connected with us for more groundbreaking stories, actionable insights, and game-changing tactics designed to fuel your business growth.